5 weeks before KJ was supposed to be born, Nicole called me and said, we got to go to the hospital, like now. I don't know, 6 hours later, KJ was here. He was a beautiful little boy, you know.
Little preemie.
Yeah, in that moment, just seemed, everything was fine. He was born on Thursday, and then a doctor comes in Saturday morning and says, hey, listen, there are some things we saw that we didn't like. We were obviously very concerned, but we had no idea what we were in store for.
He was born at the adult hospital at the University of Pennsylvania, and a very astute doctor at Penn actually checked his blood ammonia level, which is a marker for some of the metabolic diseases that we think about, and it was very, very high.
We were sitting up there, and one of the doctors came to us and said, we think we know what's wrong. Your son is very sick, but the best place in the world for your child to be when he's very sick is next door. And I'll never forget that for the rest of my life.
We would do absolutely anything for our kids, so it wasn't like a woe is me. It's, okay, this happened to us. How are we going to support him?
So a urea cycle disorder is a type of metabolic disorder where you can't get rid or process parts of the protein that you take in your diet. This toxin, ammonia, builds up in your blood and then eventually will build up in your brain. If that went on unchecked for a day to 2 days, the patient would be at very high risk of death.
You Google CPS1 deficiency and it's either fatality rate or liver transplant.
I bought a Jalen Hurts jersey, like when he was first born. It hit me like he's probably never, might not wear that jersey. You know what I mean? Like I just.
In these really severe metabolic diseases of infancy, we know that we have to act quickly if we're going to make a difference in the lives of these babies. We know that every day is really precious and matters in terms of keeping them healthy.
So being on call, in a sense, doesn't just involve the clinical team anymore. It involves a research team that's ready to work as quickly as possible to do some sleuthing in the lab and actually figure out, is there a fix for this genetic variant for the cause of the disease? The clock is ticking. The sooner we can figure out a solution as to how to fix that genetic issue, the sooner we would be able to potentially make a therapy. We had learned everything we needed to learn to actually get it all done in 6 months, in time to actually help them.
My biggest fear in all of this was giving false hope to a family. But we got to a point where we thought there might actually be a clinical team and a drug development team that could make a drug for KJ.
Our child is sick. We either have to get a liver transplant or give him this medicine that's never been given to anybody before, right? I mean, what an impossible decision to make. I just think that we felt like this was the best possible scenario for a life that at one point we didn't know if he would be able to have.
KJ received the first infusion of his drug on February 25th, 2025. This is the first time that a patient has received a personalized gene editing drug.
So when the infusion starts, most of the drug actually gets into the liver and is taken up by the cells almost immediately after it's gotten into the bloodstream. CRISPR, a gene editor, enters the nucleus of the cell, and in this case, we programmed it to go to the site of the genetic variant that is actually causing the disease in KJ.
The drug is really designed only for KJ. So the genetic variants that he has are specific to him. It's personalized medicine.
Nobody knows if it's definitely gonna work, but I think just knowing that there's so much hard work and so much love kind of going into all of this, it's important. It's important to us.
What we saw in the first 10 days, we really could give him a lot more protein.
Which ordinarily would be a problem and should cause the ammonia and the glutamine to go up. And they didn't go up.
He's had quite a nice little growth spurt. And we know that kids need protein to grow well. And so the fact that we've been able to give him more of that protein that he needs, I like to think has really helped him grow some nice chubby cheeks.
KJ, buddy, what you doing down there? What are you doing? KJ!
We did realize that while he could take more protein, he still needed his medications. It seemed like the first dose was very well tolerated and safe, but that he would probably need more if it was going to be more of a definitive therapy. Every day we've made really nice forward progress to make me think that there might be a possibility where he'll be able to be supported with very little medication or no medication.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. So probably the question on all of your minds is, how's baby KJ doing today? We actually have a slide, if we could show baby KJ as of last week in Philadelphia at a life sciences event with the treating physicians, Dr. Kiran Musunuru and Dr. Rebecca Arns-Nicholas. And he's been spotted throughout the Philadelphia region at Eagles games, among other things. So if you're in Philadelphia, remember Where's Waldo? Where's KJ? We'll make it into a series. But my name is Sadik Kassim. I'm Chief Technology Officer of Genomic Medicines, or the Omics platform at Danaher. We were fortunate and humbled to be part of the manufacturing experience, making KJ's drug product in collaboration with Aldevron, Integrated DNA Technologies, Cytiva, and Acuitas. It was really a heroic effort, and I'm really proud and privileged to be here along with my fellow panelists. So, we have a very accomplished panel here. You can see their titles. Well, actually, we have Mimi now, but I'll introduce them quickly. And we have quite a bit of content to go through, so we'll go right into the questions. First, we have Maria Kefalas, founder of MLD Voices. Then we have Devyn Smith, CEO of Arbor. Fyodor, who's Director of Innovation at the Innovative Genomics Institute and professor at Berkeley. Tom Wilton, who's heading up Innovation Ventures at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And Mimi Lee, who's a accomplished physician, scientist, heading up the program for ARPA. But today she's joining us in her capacity as a private citizen, so not representing any official organizations. So having said that, I'll take my seat here. Maria, tell us a bit about MLD Voices and the role of KJ, both in terms of the ecosystem and what it's meant to the field, based on your work, government advocacy, talking with regulators and officials.
Well, so 13 years ago, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with an ultra-rare disorder called MLD. And on the year anniversary of her diagnosis, I read about a paper in the journal Science talking about a breakthrough lentiviral-based gene therapy. And I was lying in bed crying, and I called my medical team at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, because I'm here in my capacity as a CHOP mom. And I called my team at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in 2013, and we had just started our foundation, the Callope Joy Foundation, and they said, you know what you need to do, Maria? You need to start helping children access this gene therapy in Italy. And so for the last 13 years, I have found myself a woman who could not pass biology or chemistry or physics, meeting more children treated with gene therapy probably than any physician in the world. I have been doing this for 13 years. So when we got approval for Lenmeldy in 2024, big shout out to the team here at Orchard. I see Francis Peng in the front row. And right as the Trump administration was coming in, I got calls from the same docs who are part of the KJ team, and they were terrified that their funding was done, that their work was over, their careers were finished. And so I had retired from advocacy and found myself going to Washington literally every week. And the thing that broke through was the KJ story. We thought the NIH was dead. We thought gene and cell therapy was dead. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Becca Ahrens-Nicholas. I saw Becca Ahrens-Nicholas on a plane from San Diego at the World Symposium meeting, and we were both flying home to Philadelphia, and I had just announced my retirement from advocacy, which you can see is going very well, my retirement. And Becca got on the plane, and she said, I've just upgraded my flight to first class because I think my career's done. And I need to cheer myself up. And then 2 weeks later, she treated KJ, and the world changed. And I can tell you, I don't think the team knew what the impact it would have on the field, on policy, and we were able to basically turn a salvage operation in DC for the NIH into, I'm hopeful, a renaissance for the NIH. So I'm going to stop there and let that's why I'm on this panel, if you're wondering.
No, thank you, Maria, and hopefully we can convince you to unretire, because I think we do need a patient voice that can, express that passion and commitment. Yeah. Fyodor, from your perspective in the pre-panel, you mentioned that it's not cause for celebration, although KJ is a great milestone in medical history. This is very much like a Wright brothers moment, and there's still many gaps. Maybe you could elaborate on what you meant by that.
First, I want to honor Rebecca Ahrens-Nicholas. There is no laudatory adjective set large enough to reward that amazing human for having the deepest heart, the biggest courage, the biggest skill, and the most extraordinary leadership skills that I've witnessed in 27 years working in cell and gene therapy. So I think CHOP should be very proud that Rebecca Ahrens-Nicholas is on the faculty, and the Muldoon family is very fortunate that he was transferred, Kyle Jr. was transferred to her care. So I think we are out of excuses, folks. Before Kyle Jr., we could say, yes, off targets, nope. We figured that out. But manufacture, nope. Thank you, Danaher. And again, I see several people I want to honor, Sadik, Kassim, Damaris Mills, Group Exec in charge of IDT and Aldevron, Garrett Rettick, please raise your hand. He de-risked hire. He ran the team that de-risked the gene editor. And the reason I bring this up, folks, is there was an extraordinary, for me, Avengers-like moment where within 2 weeks of diagnosis, and Rebecca's and Kieran's reach out to me at the IGI and Sadik at Danaher, that this Avengers Unite constellation of cross-functional expertise across all facets of problem space labored tirelessly to save one child of Clifton Heights, New Jersey, son of a pipe fitter and a special ed teacher. If we sit here, lean back and go, we did good, shame on us. Whether we can build genetic medicines on demand is definitively a yes. Whether, to stay with my imperfect analogy, whether we can take this Wright brothers plane and make a United Dreamliner, of which there are several hundred and they transport 300-400 people at a time all over the world, is not a hypothetical. This will happen. This will happen. I'm really glad Mimi Lee's here, even though she's a private citizen in this context. But I can speak for her. Clearly, the federal government is very excited about this. My lived experience was a meeting, thank you, Mike Lemicchia and ARM leadership for organizing a meeting with Marty McCary, thank you very much, who looks at me and goes, Fyodor, we are on your team. What do you need us to do to get out of your way? I'm like, who is he talking to? So We have technologies that provide definitive curative outcomes. We have ways to get them into the relevant organ systems. We have ways to de-risk them at astonishing speed. We have ways to manufacture them to clinic grade at equal speed. This meeting deserves credit for enabling a regulatory advance. Exactly a year ago, Sadik and I approached FDA CBER leadership, who shall remain nameless for proprietary reasons, and we looked at CBER leadership and said, this will be a first. Please do all you can to advance regulatory innovation. You will have set a precedent. And they did, and it did. Final thing. You cannot forward integrate to a future that you don't know. But namely, we don't know what technologies will exist to deliver to the entire brain to treat developmental epileptic encephalopathies, deliver to the entire gut mucosa, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, to treat, let's say, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. I don't know. But what I do know is genetic medicines on demand for rare children are unequivocally, period, and a paragraph, a gateway at every step, non-clinical pharm tox, CMC, regulatory, and even reimbursement, of how you take these N of one, N of rare genetic medicines technologies and scale them to broader patient populations. So the last thing I will say, 20 years from now, we will look at the Muldoons, we will look at Kyle Jr., who I hope by then, will be a thriving young human doing whatever he feels like doing. And I really hope that what happens to us is more or less what happened when we look at Emily Whitehead, right? We have, what, 6 approved medicines?
7.
7? Sadik has his name on 3. 50,000 patients treated. Again, CHOP, kudos, Carl June, etc. Let us commit to ourselves that we'll stop saying yes, but, and simply say yes, because all the technologies exist, the regulators agree, the manufacturers are with us. Where we look back at 2025, 10 years from now, with the same sense of pride as a field that we've delivered these N of rare medicines and thus enabled a broader spectrum of disease indications to be treated with editors on demand.
Thank you, Fyodor. And you mentioned forward integrating to the future, and I'm really glad that we have Mimi here to tell us about her vision, having been in the field for many years, translational researcher, seeing some of the problems in the field. From your lens, from your vantage point, where does the field need to forward integrate to into the future based on everything that Fyodor has talked about? Oh, you're on mute, Mimi. Yeah.
Thanks for the question, and I feel almost like an imposter being on this panel with the team that made KJ's story a reality. I am here as a private citizen, not representing the government or any agency or any specific program. However, I think that we have seen in the last several years incredible milestones. One with the success of Casgevy and the first CRISPR editor, and now with the story of baby KJ. And Fyodor is right. I sense that this administration, all the way up to the secretary of HHS, is very, very enthused by the program, and he is. He's looking forward to being able to announce that we were able to catalyze this into the future. As Fyodor mentioned, the technologies that are rapidly evolving we can't even predict what's going to be around next year. This community, this audience that we are facing today, is going to bring to the table many, many more precision biotechnologies, I believe. And we will much more rapidly be able to, with the marriage of the high unmet needs of all of the rare diseases, which are currently commercially of very low interest because of their low commercial viability. With that, the marriage of the biotech and the compute technology, we will be able to move much more quickly to learn biology and address pathophysiology at the genetic level. So I think we will be looking at a future paradigm in medicine that will change drug development from looking for applications of breakthrough science to treat one disease for big populations, but really treating each and every one of us as if we were baby KJ. We are each uniquely different. We have different genetics. And now we have the tools to query those genetics and address them. And I see in 10 years that we will have a future precision medicine that will include multimodal approaches like the one baby KJ received. And so that is one, and I urge us to also remember, it's not, I'm a clinician, it's not just for physical diseases, but for neuropsychiatric mental conditions as well. So I think we're at a very exciting moment, and I think we have an opportunity to innovate what the ecosystem can be, and it's going to look different from what it is today. I'm not sure what it will be, but I can envision a much more robust, successful industry and pipeline in the future.
Oh, thank you, Mimi. And last week I heard you speaking, and one of the phrases that caught my attention that you mentioned is the value of rare diseases in terms of opening up larger disease indications. And the phrase that you used is, rare will get us there, which you should trademark that. Like, we should make that into t-shirts or something, because I think, part of the story of KJ is that one of the physicians, Kiran Musunuru, is the founder of Verve Therapeutics. And Verve is targeting cardiovascular disease. So he used a lot of that know-how and technology to inform how the editor and the delivery system would get built for KJ. So there is this sort of two-way street where people often think of rare just being a small market, but it really is that learning cycle that informs larger indications that then goes back to smaller indications. And I think related to ARPA, we had the announcement today of the Embody program, which is aiming to in vivo reprogramming for immunotherapies, which I think is a really great opportunity in terms of that government investment in small diseases, large indications, and then that learning cycle that will hopefully enable more progress. But the field isn't going to be built on good vibes and good intentions. And I think Devyn, from your lens, from your vantage point as CEO of Arbor, realistically, let's get to brass tacks. What are the big challenges that you're seeing in terms of the private markets, the public markets, and more explicitly, is there a minimum threshold of patients that you think of from your vantage point that would enable a company like an Arbor or some of your peers to really address this opportunity?
Yeah, it's an important question. We've had a lot of discussion about this. So at Arbor, our focus is twofold. In the liver, we're going after rare pediatric disorders. Our lead program is in an ultra rare pediatric liver disorder called primary hyperoxaluria. There's probably maybe 1,000 patients in the US, roughly equal number in Europe. And to your point, it's interesting, as we've spoken with investors really aren't that interested in programs that can generate a couple $100 million a year in peak year sales. It's just like no one's interested. It's not a space we want to put money into. But I think that, as you said, it's important that we start to validate our approaches where the biology is clear, where delivery is clear, and there are clear measurable approaches to success. So in PH1, where we're going, it is an approvable biomarker, a urinary biomarker. And yesterday, we actually announced a partnership with a mid-sized pharma who's very interested in their licensing this program from us to push it forward. So, it was kind of nice to send the PR to our investors and say, perhaps Pfizer or larger companies may not be as interested in sort of this space, but there are companies interested who are dedicated to driving rare diseases forward, and that's important. And I think the story of baby KJ is fantastic because not only does it enable the N of ones, but I think the approaches that have been taken, both from a regulatory perspective and thinking creatively on CMC, will benefit the entire industry and field. And we've got to think differently and do differently in this space because the technology, as Fyodor said, it's there to revolutionize the treatment of patients. I think we've got to do differently to do so. And I think if you look at gene editing from an investment, a market perspective, we sort of went through the typical Gartner hype cycle. You could raise money by just saying you were thinking of gene editing a few years ago. Now, it's much different, and investors want results. And I'm really happy to say that there's been, I think, probably 7 clinical trial readouts with gene editing, and every single one of them has been positive and has reflected what people saw in NHPs. The translation is 100%, and you do not see that in any other modality. And I think that investors are beginning to it used to be, well, can you actually edit in vivo? Well, that's done. We can do it. We can make it. Now the questions are around, well, is it commercially viable? And I think those questions will be answered. The first approved in vivo drugs are coming shortly, and it will be answered. And then it's a race to see how many patients we can treat across many diseases. So I'm very optimistic. I think we're sort of, as cell and gene therapy, we probably hit bottom earlier this year, and we're climbing out. And I think it's exciting because there's a lot more interest. Stories like baby KJ just have really sparked a lot of interest in looking forward to the future.
Great, thanks, Devyn, and congratulations on the partnership. A great tailwind and a great signal for the industry in general. But Tom, Devyn does highlight this tension that does exist in the system, and I think others have alluded to this as well. The innovation isn't necessarily scientific and technological, but it's almost like we have to innovate on the business front or on the way that you make these things accessible. And there is this threshold where it doesn't make sense for industry to go in, but it does make sense for academia or medical centers to go in. But then how do you resolve that tension in a way that enables greater validation and greater access to patients? And from your vantage point at CHOP, I'd love to hear your perspective on some of these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the chance to join the panel today. Becca Owens-Nicholas was hoping to attend, but obviously has her hands full figuring out the next steps for the metabolic disease program at CHOP. So I've spent most of my career driving collaborations at that interface between academia, biotech, industry, working with service providers as well. And I only joined CHOP a couple of months ago, but before I joined, I read about this amazing story. I think it was in the New York Times. And to be honest with you, at a point, having spent 12 years in cell and gene therapy, I was feeling fairly jaded, not quite sure what the future held. And this personally for me reinvigorated my interest in the space to see this amazing program with the whole team coming together here initially with the doctors at Penn, where baby KJ was born, and then at CHOP being responsible for his care. It's certainly an inflection point, I think, for the industry at the moment. We've been through some of the boom times, some of the bust. And for me, this was just an incredible example of when we, as a sector, can come together across academia, across industry, and work together to pool those resources, the expertise, the different tools that we have at our disposal, which are formidable at this point. And then with a very singular goal, and in this case, developing this potentially life-saving therapy for baby KJ in such an incredibly short space of time. Listening to some of the discussions over the last few days, I think that the challenges that we deal with as a sector, a lot of it comes down to the time it takes to develop these new therapies, the cost of developing them, and to really see a way forward where we can actually develop these therapeutics for a larger number of children like KJ. We have to address those challenges, and that's not just academia, industry, it's regulators, manufacturers coming together to come up with novel partnership structures to enable that. And for me, this was an exceptional example of that collaboration.
That's great, and I think part of the story of KJ is also the speed by which things happened, and I think this is maybe a bigger existential threat or opportunity for the field as well. We look at other geographies outside of the U.S. and Europe where things can go from bench to bedside in rapid order. I mean, we had, for example, 2 weeks ago, the first in vivo proof of concept of a CD19 CAR T for lupus, treating 5 patients. That we see many companies here have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, but still a year or two away from actually getting clinical insights. So there is that tension of speed, but then also ensuring regulatory robustness. So I'll open it up to the panel. I mean, how are you feeling about the regulatory landscape in the US, Europe, other geographies, and can companies, either biotech or academics, really compete in environments where you have other geographies that can go very quickly from bench to bedside?
I'm happy to start on that one. I mean, if you think about it was just a few years ago, a couple of our peer companies, Verve and Intellia, filed their INDs. They had come to the US IND with clinical data from other countries because they were able to get through the system much faster there. The US didn't know what to do. It was a bit of a mess. And it took them, about a year to get the IND cleared, which is ridiculous. But that's what happened. Now you flash forward, last year, we were the first gene editing company actually to file IND first, not go ex-US, file it first. We got it cleared first round, and we're able to move through. But your point is critical in that once you finally get through that, the ability to dose a patient in this country or in Europe after you have clearance still takes 6 months or more because of the relatively Byzantine system we have for clinical trials. And so there are other geographies, you said, that are much faster, much cheaper, and are able to go from a standing start to clinical data years ahead of us. And it is a real threat, and I think that's why examples on baby KJ and others, like, we have to completely rethink the way we do things because the current approach is not working. Like, it's keeping therapies from patients that could truly be fundamentally life-changing. It's keeping, it's driving costs up so much that you do have to raise $200 million in order to even get something there, and it just is not a sustainable approach. So this is a great wake-up call, I think, as Fyodor said. Like, we have to think and do differently here.
Can I? So when we were engaging with the FDA, it was after coming through, Lenmeldi actually went through Europe first. So I, as an American advocate, was having conversations in Europe with the European regulators and then came to the United States. And it was challenging to use European data in the US. And Lenmeldi, I think, when we were initially doing it, people said, you'll never get through. You can never do this approval without a US-based clinical trial. So I learned a lot, and it was very challenging. And I joke that every time Peter Marks would see me, he would run away from me. And that several people can bear witness to that. But at the same time, I remember speaking to Laura Deng, who is one of our neurologists who advised us in engagement with the FDA, a brilliant neurologist at CHOP, and she said, we're asking the FDA to approve a lentil-viral-based gene therapy in a baby that looks perfectly healthy. And I remember and she said, we have to give them the courage and the faith to do that. And so as an advocate, I feel part of this engagement with FDA requires conversations that maybe patient advocates can do in a way that's honoring the science, honoring the technology, honoring the constraints of FDA regulators who are passionate about advancing the science, but also understandably cautious about taking on this science and making sure that the patients and the community are safe. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a way of thinking about that engagement in this new, incredibly exciting environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Fyodor?
I'm really eager for my panelists to talk, especially Dr. Lee, given even as a private citizen, there are things she's saying that are really resonant. I just want to say one thing, folks. I mentioned it's hard to forward integrate to a future that we don't know, but I can tell you 2 things. Our field will move towards non-viral active pharmaceutical ingredients. So these are nucleic acids and, for example, lipid or protein excipients. And once you have something that is chemically synthesized, it's a fundamentally different price point to what the APIs actually cost. Now, we all stand on the shoulders of titans of gene therapy: Kathy Hai, Luxturna, Carl June, David Tichy, Steve Grupp, Kim Raya, and so on, and Lenti, Don Cohn, Luigi Naldini. 10 years from now, on-demand genetic medicines will be non-viral. Second, The other thing that will objectively happen is the regulatory paradigm will basically be what it currently is for cancer mRNA vaccines. This is a certainty. So right now, Merck and Moderna, or BioNTech, can make a GMP mRNA personalized medicine for cancer in 2 weeks, vein to vein time. So the biggest challenge for us, I think, is exactly what Devyn just said. You know, you have 1,000 kids and adults in the US, and the institutional investors go, sorry, not interesting. I think one way forward is to, and this is, I really want to thank Kieran and Rebecca for inspiring my thinking about this, as well as Don Cohn at UCLA. We have to stop thinking about diseases as things that are caused by one mutation in one gene. We have to start grouping patients by clinical syndrome. And Mike Lemicki and Tim Hunt and the leadership of the ARM had a marvelous workshop on scientific platforms in genetic medicines that was run with the FDA, it got published. And this idea of umbrella trials where you're enrolling a subject not because they have mutation number 16 and gene number 55, but because they have a clinical syndrome. It could be severe combined immune deficiency. There are 23 genes mutations in which cause SCID. It could be urea cycle disease. There are 7 different genes mutations in which can cause urea cycle disease. So when you switch to platform-based manufacture of non-viral pharmaceutical ingredients, when you switch to in vivo administration, like for Kyle, and when you start to gather larger patient cohorts into umbrella clinical trial protocols, then suddenly we will start to get to larger numbers. And I think those larger numbers will give people, this is exactly what you said and what you said, Sadik, the confidence that these technologies are clinically validated. And that clinical validation, I think, will just change the tone in the room. I really think that.
Great, thanks. Mimi, you had something to add as well, or?
I'd love to add to what Devyn, Maria, and Fyodor just mentioned. I think I agree. We have to think differently. The way that we've been thinking about developing drugs, I was on Roctavian's program before phase 1 patients were being dosed. That was pretty, it's commercially, it wasn't a gigantic success. But there's an ecosystem change that needs to happen. And it starts with really working like the team that realized KJ's solution. A team of people that are willing to go across moats, across fences, and across walls, aligned on the singular mission of saving a life. I'm a clinician, I'm a former neurosurgeon. When you have the ability and you are in the position to, and you are called upon, there was a question of being on call, Kieran had mentioned. When you're on call and you're called upon to save a life, you and the rest of the teams, no matter where they're coming from, will go to where they need to be in order to realize that solution. And that is something that I think we as industry, academia, government, nonprofit can maybe ponder a bit to see how we can do that. And work less in our siloed fashion, which is how we've come to be. Maria's point is a key one for me. I think there's no one, and you heard me say this at the other meeting, Sadik, there's no one with the deeply immersive experiences like patients have, who understand the urgency and those that can respect the science and the rigor required to take the calculated risk of treating a baby that looks pretty good from the outside, but we think that they're not going to be doing so well in terms of a prognostic way. The patients, I love that Peter Marks ran away from Maria every time that he saw her. That everyone needs a Maria behind them. Every industry, every team needs a Maria, actually in front of them, to lead this change. That's what I mean by rare will get us there. It is this community that inspires me to know that we will have a new paradigm in medicine and how we develop drugs. And it will result in a future where we each have personalized precision medical strategies from birth through death.
No, I love that, and that's a great transition, Mimi, because you're talking about the patients need to be sitting in front of us, and sitting in front of me is Victoria Gray, coincidentally, who has been really the champion for, I think, gene editing and really enabling the field to move forward. And especially, if you listen to Victoria, when's your talk, Victoria? Wednesday? Yeah, make sure you go to
Do
Victoria's.
not miss Victoria's talk. First of all, you will sob for 45 minutes. Second, you will stand up more inspired for change you have been in your entire life, and I speak from direct experience.
And you know, not to steal thunder from Victoria's talk, but I think part of the patient journey that many talk about is sort of that handoff between different physician and different treatment center, because you know there's this inability to diagnose, or there's this inability to really refer people to the appropriate center. Maybe Maria, you can talk about this a bit. I think one of the stories of KJ as well is the fact that he was born at HUP, the Hospital of UPenn, next to one of the world's leading centers for urea cycle disorder. So he happened to be born in a place where they did targeted genome sequencing that could identify the genomic variant that could then be actionable, but many people don't live in that type of an environment. So Maria, tell us a bit about how you're thinking of it from the diagnostic perspective, the referral perspective, and a lot of these barriers that exist for the patient and their families.
We all must acknowledge and need to be reminded daily that the cell and gene therapy revolution has a twin, and that's sequencing and testing. And the other heroes of the story were actually the genetics counseling team at CHOP that so quickly identified that mutation. If he had been in a regional hospital 5 miles away, we wouldn't probably be on this panel today. And as we move forward in this field, I have said to Bobby Gaspar, the CEO of Orchard, on more than one occasion, I said, on the day of the approval, I said, Bobby, don't celebrate and relax. Now you have to reinvent the entire diagnostic paradigm of medicine and convince payers, patients, and physicians themselves to trust in a newborn sequencing or newborn testing system that allows you to say that this child looks asymptomatic now, but is going to need a very dramatic intervention. And I've been struggling with this personally as an advocate. We've had families picked up through the best diagnostic tools in the world, and they don't believe the doctor. They don't believe the diagnosis because the baby looks fine. And the doctors struggle to say, well, we have time to wait, when in fact, the disease is already subclinically destroying the central nervous system on its way to the brain. Certainly that was KJ's story. So we have a huge challenge to not only lift up this incredible science, find a way to make it sustainable, make sure that it can be accessed by the patients who need it, but we also have to get physicians and the entire medical profession to reimagine how we define sickness. And especially our parents. We don't trust vaccines in America. We don't trust Tylenol in America. It is not easy to convince a family with a high school diploma that, yes, they need to have their child's genetic code corrected. So that is a huge thing that people like me are very excited to take on, which is meaning my retirement is ending. Probably.
Sadik, can I offer a tiny ray of hope through this?
Please.
It's not my story to tell, but I will tell you what's relevant to what was just said. There is a devastating neurodegenerative disease for which there is about to begin a clinical trial for a targeted genetic medicine. The agency has allowed the sponsors, after they've dosed a few symptomatics, to then advance the trial to a cohort of pre-symptomatic individuals. This is a landmark development. Why did it work? Because the agency understands, as do the doctors and the patient advocates, that if you wait until the symptoms kick in, you might as well not start. The reason I interrupted is to say there will be more stories like this. And as they emerge out of the clinical practice, where agencies, not just the FDA, Health Canada, MHRA, EMA, the TGA, they see clinical evidence that you can dose a pre-symptomatic in a setting where that person is a bearer of a strong driver allele, where the natural history is not ambiguous. I actually have high hopes that in the next 5 to 7 years, pre-symptomatics carrying severe driver alleles will be dosable.
And to that end, I mean, we're working in ALS, where you have today, patients with the SOD mutation. Or you look at Huntington's, like they know they're going to get disease. They're just waiting for that time bomb to go off. And today, if we want to run a clinical trial with a gene editor, which we're doing in that disease, you have to start with symptomatic patients, which is, to Fyodor's point, it's important for those symptomatic patients, but at the same time, why do we need to wait? As opposed to, we know it will fix it, and go in much earlier when they're pre-symptomatic. And so I think it is, I agree with Fyodor, there is a future where these types of therapies are used as preventive medicines, right? That future is coming, it will come quickly, but that completely changes the way you think about clinical trials.
Yes, it does.
And how you think about it. So it's revolutionizing everything, but I think it is necessary to bring us to the point where it's ridiculous for a genetic disease to wait until someone has a symptom. Like it's just, particularly when you have the technology that can change that trajectory.
Yeah, no, and I think the key point here is that technologies exist, but I think the tension in the system from my vantage point is not necessarily a technological tension. We have David Walt, who's the founder of Illumina. He's on the scientific advisory board of Danaher. And I attended a talk about 2 weeks ago where he talked about, the cost of sequencing, whole genome sequencing. From the Human Genome Project to today, one instrument from Illumina can do the work of 42 labs, 10 years. Here you can do it in 17 minutes, sequence a whole genome. So the technology is available to identify the mutations. But it seems like part of the tension is there aren't enough physician scientists like Becca and Kieran out there that are actually going to know how to intervene in an appropriate manner. Sort of that risk-benefit approach and really looking out for the interest of the patient without necessarily going into liability issues from the healthcare system, et cetera. I mean, Mimi, as a treating physician, maybe you have some thoughts there. I mean, how do we overcome that educational component? And it's not just educating the folks that are maybe skeptical of healthcare, but it's also the physicians, it seems like, as well, where a lot of times there is resistance to use new technologies. Mimi, maybe you have some thoughts there from your vantage point.
Yes, we can be real Luddites, us physicians. I think that we have to remember rare is just one end of the continuum, and the label rare is an empirical line in the sand. Depending on the regulatory body in which you are, it's a different number. This is really a solution for all of us. My hypertension might be different from your hypertension. Every individual is unique. We will get to a place where the way we teach medicine, the way we train physicians, I can see, generalists, primary care physicians, internists becoming much more critical in taking care of patients in the future. We have become extraordinarily subspecialized in medicine. My friends take care of a retina the size of a postage stamp, and that's all they see when they see a human. Humans are systems. I encourage us to stop thinking about a disease target and making a drug for that, but really thinking about systems biology at the genetic level. And how do we address that pathophysiology that can cause disease and suffering at every level, including the genetic level? So it's not a tech front and center. It's now we actually have the tools to look at systemic, cellular, organ, cellular, molecular, and now genetic levels. And that is going to change the paradigm of medicine. And with this, part of the impetus for all of us, from wherever we sit, industry, academia, nonprofit, the payers, the regulators, we all need to push together and row in the same direction towards that future. So we're in a really interesting moment historically. I think this is an incredible time to demonstrate a different way that we can move forward. I think you remember someone asked me at that last conference, how are we going to fix all these things? And I said, we won't. We're going to pilot a new way. We need bold, courageous thinkers and doers to pilot a new way. And on the stage is a handful of those that were able to do it for one baby, but I see in the future we will be doing it for everyone.
No, inspiring. Thanks, Mimi. Are we opening this for the audience questions or? Yeah, oh, we have mics, okay. So, as you're thinking of your questions here, Tom, from your vantage point at CHOP, I mean, how are you thinking about changing the practice of medicine along the lines of what Mimi is saying, training the next generation of physicians to really be able to, take on and make these things actionable?
Yeah, of course. So, our focus at CHOP is really threefold. Outstanding innovation and research driven by our research institute, care delivery driven by the health system, and then professional education across the organization. So, just sitting here listening to the discussion as it's unfolded, for me, the key takeaway is it really requires an integrated approach across each of those different areas. And within CHOP, obviously what we're trying to do is to figure out how we can scale some of the work that's been done there. But clearly the lesson from this panel is that it takes an army. It's not going to be achieved within any one group. It has to be industry, academia, government collaborations coming together. I think the Arbor initiative, the Thrive initiative is a perfect example of that, of trying to take something and say, how do we scale this? And providing a framework for those different organizations to come together to do that. And certainly from a CHOP perspective, we're continuing to do that within the organization and looking for collaborations and partnerships to do that. Ultimately, I always try and come back to where are we trying to get to, and I think it is this brave new world where every child has the opportunity to have their genome sequenced at birth, and then we have this toolkit of therapeutics that we can deliver to them, but it's such a different approach to medicine. It's a different approach to commercialization. I've spent most of my career working in the primary care space with NCEs. Just trying to get your head around the change that we're going to have to go through as an industry over the next few years to make that a reality is huge, but I think we're up for the fight.
Can I just add one 60-second example? So there's a fetal surgeon at UCSF. Her name is Tippi McKenzie, and I learned this from her. Fetal surgery was pioneered at UCSF. And the reason I bring this up is today, if you have an inborn error of development that has not to do with genetics, but just the physiology of the physicians at UCSF can do intrauterine repair and elsewhere. So this was invented at UCSF, but is now established medical practice across leading centers of clinical excellence. One UCSF, one team, and now here we are. There's no question in my mind that this is doable. It's, to me, more than anything, the only way to find out how to safely edit people is to edit more people. We just have to understand that we have to be brave and thoughtful, ethical, and in diseases where there's the benefit-risk consideration that's been met, we just have to go for it. And I think if you build it, they will come. And by that, I mean there are so many physician scientist fellows from the UCSF training program that come to the AJ saying, I want to learn how to do CRISPR. So I think we are I'm really glad CHOP is doing this. I think we are at a moment where the physician scientist community is rising to train in this.
Great. Any questions in the audience? Do we have, right here, maybe. Yeah, I think she's, but.
Great discussion. Now let's get to the heart and soul of it. KJ was not told you can't have the team's help, and that team must have known that there was going to be funding from someplace to do this. I don't know what the financial stability or profile is of KJ's parents, but I'm just guessing it's way beyond their means. So how did you get it funded? That's question number one. Number two, we're going through a U.S. healthcare reform. And I think, as you said, Marty McCary is looking for ways to do things differently. There's a lot of things that are coming through that are different. So the question I've got is, who do you think should have the obligation, because the payers aren't going to want to do it, where should the obligation be as the science on a genetic level is demonstrated, and it can be, where should the obligation be to fund this, and where should your efforts be, everybody's efforts be put on policy change, as you've been putting so much effort and so much passion into the science? Yeah,
I mean, I'll take the first part on the funding, and then Fyodor, feel free. So part of the funding, I mean, it was really the kindness and in-kind contributions from multiple sources, including the Somatic Cell Gene Editing Consortium, Aldevron, IDT, Acuitas, I see Ingtam here, who's the CSO, among other entities that contributed to this. But I think the idea is now with funding sources like ARPA-H and other philanthropic and maybe business models, this is the roadmap to enable something potentially sustainable. But this is the elephant in the room. I mean, funding. And I think if to Fyodor's point, if you build it, they will come. That's the aspiration. Yeah, of course.
Right. So I'll just give you one number. So Kymriah is $475,000. And in part because you have to make it in a facility. You harvest the cells, you manufacture them with a lenti, and you dose the patient. So it's, as of 3 hours ago, it's public that the federal government has funded an ARPA-H program called Embody. And the program officer, Daria Fedukin, is here in the room. And so the reason I bring this up is that it's a stated goal, and this is public information, that the performers on Embody should develop an injectable CAR-T medicine for $1,000 per injection. And that is not unrealistic. You just have to innovate hardcore over an extended period and clinically trial this. So folks, I think the cogs will fall. I absolutely am convinced of this. But we are in this peculiar period where, Devyn has a phenomenal technology to treat a severe disease with 1,000 patients, and the institutional investors are not interested. So I just, the federal government stepped up big time, as did all the in-kind contributions for baby Kyle Jr. I think in this transition period, philanthropy, federal government, in-kind, we just have to get to more clinical POC where we know where we can cut the costs and create new both policy change and regulatory reform.
I'll just add, I think the other element that is challenging, right? It's the total addressable market, right? That's the way investors think. What's the TAM? And if you charge $4 million a patient, you can get to a reasonable TAM on a small number of patients. The challenge with that is, that is hardly scalable across tens of thousands of patients in this country, because then your entire healthcare budget then goes to fund it. So it's a really interesting challenge, I think, that we're all wrestling with here, because you do these, we can drop the cost of goods significantly. I agree with Fyodor, that's very doable. The question is, how do you create a sustainable business when you have 1,000 patients and you're charging, I don't know, $10,000 a patient, right? That's a very different model from anything anyone's ever done. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to continue to push on all areas and to see where it breaks.
Mimi?
Yeah, if I could just add, I think there's not one entity or one sector that holds the bag. We all need to come together. And I would argue, if we wanted to look at the really, really North Star, the total addressable market in the end is all of us. Rare will get us there. Right now, we need to demonstrate, yes, more proof of concept. I agree with Fyodor. We need to demonstrate a different way that we deliver this care. I'm a cancer survivor. Every time I go to MD Anderson, I go to one building. I'm in and out on the same day with all of my tests and seeing my doctor. We need to be able to do that for all of us so that we can get our unique precision medical strategies and care. It means innovation on many, many, many different levels by many, many, many different partners of the ecosystem. And I think that's the challenge in front of us if we want to get there. And it will save, we have one of the most expensive medical systems in the world, but we have not the best outcomes. We will see results if we can all look towards a different way and innovate on how we can improve what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now doesn't work.
Thank you, Mimi. And well, we started off this panel with the patient perspective, patient advocate perspective from Maria, and we'll close it there as well. Maria, I mean, I think there's quite a bit of optimism, obviously a lot of realistic hurdles that have to be overcome, but how can we avoid giving patients and their families false hope? And what's the best thing that patient groups and patients themselves can do in this sort of interim period where we're building the infrastructure and trying to figure out these models from your perspective?
Oh, that's such a great question. I truly believe that patients are incredibly important in this ecosystem. and there are certain jobs that only patient advocates can do. At the same time, I'm going to kind of throw my community a little bit under the bus and say that I don't believe in citizen scientists, in the sense that a grieving parent who is trying to save their child should not be running a clinical trial. And one of the reasons this story, yeah, I know, I said it. And because you can't go to the FDA with data that's generated by grief-stricken parents who are equity investors in their own clinical trial. And this is a problem. And at the same time, one of the secret ingredients of the KJ story was that Becca and Kieran had been thinking about this for years. They were NIH-funded researchers who had been pondering this question. And when KJ came into their care, they thought, we are ready. I am sure, I have no evidence to back this up, but I'm sure that Becca is getting people showing up at her door every day with suitcases of money saying, make my baby the next KJ. And the science has to be stewarded and protected by the patient community. I am not the typical patient advocate. I never believed I would save my daughter. I never thought that I was going to invent the science or launch a company. And that clarity allowed me, I believe, to be a more macro-thinking leader in the space and say, I'm going to defend my scientists, I'm going to be patient with the regulatory engagement, and I'm going to work on this great question that Mimi talked about, which is, I always say, the science of gene therapy is not as hard as the money and the math of it. I've been saying that for 8 years now, and I'm still beating my head against that particular wall, but I believe with Dr. Lee that we can build this new world. But we're going to have to blow things up, but also protect the good things and not go so fast that we harm the people who are coming after us. So that's my final thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And we've convinced her to come out of retirement,
Yeah,
and hopefully, as you can see, a lot of opportunities for all of us. So hopefully none of you are thinking of retirement anytime soon. A lot of opportunities for the field. Please join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you.